Welcome to A Millionaire's Second Chance, a story that will shake everything you think you know about love, resilience, and redemption. Imagine this. A wealthy entrepreneur crosses paths with a homeless woman during a stormy night in New York City. But here's the twist. She's not just any stranger. She's his lost childhood love. What happens next will leave you questioning fate itself. Stay tuned, because this isn't just a story. It's a journey that will grip your heart and spark your soul. The rain in New York was relentless that evening, drumming against windows and cascading down the city's skyscrapers. For Alexander Carter, the downpour mirrored his mood, an unyielding storm that had settled over his heart for months. Despite his millionaire status, Alex couldn't shake the emptiness gnawing at him. His name adorned the covers of Forbes and Time magazines, and his company's success was the stuff of legends. Yet none of it filled the void he felt when the applause faded and the crowds dispersed. Tonight, he had no meetings, no glamorous events. He wandered the streets, his thoughts as heavy as the clouds overhead. Passing through Central Park, Alex's polished shoes splashed through shallow puddles. The city was alive with its usual chaos. Cabs honking, umbrellas bobbing up and down like colorful buoys in a sea of commuters. Yet, for all its noise, the city felt eerily silent to Alex, as if the universe were conspiring to force him to listen to his thoughts. Just as he was about to cross the street, he spotted something or someone out of place. A figure huddled under a tattered blanket on a bench. The woman looked out of sync with her surroundings, while everyone else bustled past with purpose. She sat motionless, her thin frame barely visible beneath the soaked fabric. Her head was bowed, her hair a tangled mess of damp strands clinging to her face. Something about her struck Alex, stopping him in his tracks. It wasn't pity, at least not entirely. It was a strange sense of familiarity, like seeing an old photograph you couldn't quite place. For a moment, Alex hesitated. What was he supposed to do? He wasn't naive. New York was full of people struggling to survive. But this was different. He couldn't explain it, but he felt drawn to her, as if an invisible thread connected them. Against his better judgment, or perhaps in line with it, he approached her. "Miss," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the rain. The woman flinched but didn't look up. She tightened her grip on the blanket, her shoulders stiffening as if bracing for an attack. Alex took a cautious step closer, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not here to bother you," he continued, his tone calm and measured. "You just look like you need help." Finally, she lifted her head, and Alex's breath caught. Her face was gaunt, her cheeks hollow from what he could only assume were weeks, maybe months, of hunger. But her eyes, they were hauntingly familiar, dark and piercing. They seemed to see right through him. For a split second, Alex felt exposed, like she had peeled back the layers of his carefully constructed persona and seen the truth beneath. "Go away," she said hoarsely, her voice rough and cracked. Alex didn't move. Instead, he crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "Look, I don't mean to pry, but it's pouring out here. Do you have anywhere to go?" Her expression shifted, a mixture of defiance and despair. "I'm fine," she muttered, though her trembling hands betrayed her words. He wanted to insist, to tell her she wasn't fine, but something held him back. This wasn't a boardroom negotiation where he could charm or outwit his opponent. This was delicate. He needed to tread lightly. "All right," he said finally, standing up. "I'll leave you alone. But if you change your mind," he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it gently on the bench beside her. "Call me. No strings attached." She eyed the card suspiciously, but didn't make a move to take it. Alex lingered for a moment longer, as if hoping she'd say something, anything, to stop him from leaving. When she didn't, he sighed and turned away, his heart heavier than when he'd arrived. As he walked away, he couldn't stop thinking about her. There was something undeniably familiar about her, a nagging sensation that he couldn't shake. Images from his childhood flashed in his mind. Carefree summers, laughter echoing through the air, and a pair of dark eyes that had once been filled with life. Could it be her? The thought seemed absurd, yet it clung to him like the rain soaking through his coat. Alex didn't sleep that night. The woman's face haunted him, her eyes staring back at him every time he closed his own. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself he had done what he could, but deep down, he knew he couldn't let it go. The next day, he found himself back at the park. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a gray, overcast sky. The bench where she had been was empty, the blanket gone. Alex's chest tightened with disappointment. Had she moved on? Was she safe? Or had she simply disappeared into the city's underbelly? Another soul swallowed whole by the relentless grind of life? As he stood there, staring at the vacant bench, a thought struck him. If it really was her, his childhood love, then fate had given him a second chance. And he wasn't about to waste it. Alex couldn't shake the thought. That woman in the rain wasn't just anyone. She was Liz, Elizabeth Bennet. It had been over 2 decades since he'd last seen her, but he was certain now. How many times had they raced their bikes through the dusty streets of their old neighborhood? How often had they sworn they'd conquer the world together? Alex smiled bitterly at the memory. Back then, they were inseparable, 2 halves of the same coin. And yet, life had pulled them apart, as it often does with childhood friends. Seeing her now, battered by circumstances he couldn't yet comprehend, was like reopening an old wound he didn't know he had. The next day, Alex launched into action. He wasn't the kind of man to wait idly once a decision was made. His first step was simple yet critical. Find her. He visited the park where he'd first seen her, scouring the benches and corners, asking discreet questions to the regulars who hung around. Most shrugged him off, indifferent or suspicious of his polished appearance. A few mentioned seeing a woman who matched Liz's description, but hadn't noticed where she went. Frustration mounted, but Alex wasn't deterred. If this was Liz, and he was increasingly convinced it was, then he owed it to both of them to try. Late that evening, Alex sat in his sleek penthouse, staring at an old photo album he dug out from storage. There she was, grinning beside him at a summer picnic, her dark eyes alive with mischief. He traced her face with his thumb, a pang of guilt settling in his chest. What had happened to her? They'd lost touch after his family moved for his father's career, and he had let the years pile up without ever reaching out. Now, she was a shadow of the vibrant girl he once knew, and it hurt more than he cared to admit. The breakthrough came 3 days later. A contact at a local shelter called him with information. Someone matching Liz's description had been spotted at a soup kitchen in Brooklyn. Without hesitation, Alex grabbed his keys and drove there. The kitchen was a stark contrast to the luxury he was used to. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the air thick with the smell of canned soup and day-old bread. Alex felt out of place in his tailored jacket, but he didn't care. He scanned the room, his heart pounding, and then he saw her. She was seated at a corner table, hunched over a bowl of soup, her hair falling like a curtain around her face. Her clothes were worn, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted the spoon to her lips. Alex hesitated, unsure of how to approach her. Would she even remember him? Or worse, would she reject him outright? Taking a deep breath, he walked over, his footsteps faltering as he drew closer. "Liz," he said softly. Her head shot up, her eyes narrowing as she looked at him. For a moment, there was no recognition, only suspicion. Then, slowly, her expression shifted, her brows knitted together, her lips parting slightly as realization dawned. "Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He nodded, relief flooding him. "It's me," he said, smiling nervously. "It's been a long time." Liz stared at him, her gaze flitting between his face and his expensive clothes. Her expression was a mix of disbelief and something darker, resentment perhaps. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone guarded. Alex hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "I've been looking for you," he admitted. "I saw you a few days ago in Central Park. I didn't realize it was you at first, but when I did, he trailed off, searching her face for a reaction. Liz's eyes hardened. Why now? She asked bitterly. Where were you all these years? Her words hit him like a slap. She had every right to be angry. He had disappeared from her life without explanation, and now, years later, he was here, claiming concern. I don't have a good excuse, he said finally, his voice heavy with regret. I let time and distance get in the way. But I'm here now, Liz, and I want to help. Liz let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. Help, she echoed. Do you think you can just swoop in and fix everything? Life doesn't work like that, Alex. I'm not trying to fix everything, he said quickly. I just want to help you get back on your feet, whatever it takes. She looked at him skeptically, her defenses firmly in place. Why would you do that? Out of guilt? Pity? No, Alex said firmly. Because I care about you. I always have. For a moment, Liz was silent, her gaze searching his face for signs of insincerity. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, she said reluctantly, but don't expect me to trust you overnight. I wouldn't expect anything less, Alex said, a small smile tugging at his lips. As they left the soup kitchen together, Alex felt a glimmer of hope. It wouldn't be easy. Liz was clearly wary of him, and the road ahead would be long. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something meaningful. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Alex had always believed that success was a clear path paved by determination and hard work. But as he sat across from Liz in his penthouse, watching her stare blankly at the untouched plate of food in front of her, he realized how naive that perspective had been. Life, he now understood, wasn't a straight line. For some, it was a maze of dead ends and sharp turns, and Liz had clearly been lost in it for years. He wanted to help her, but where would he begin? She was like a glass figure, beautiful but fragile, and he feared pushing too hard might shatter her completely. Liz didn't speak much that first night. She accepted his offer of a hot meal and a place to stay with visible reluctance, her every movement tinged with suspicion. When Alex handed her a clean towel and showed her to the guest room, she hesitated, standing in the doorway like she expected it all to be a cruel joke. "It's yours," he said gently, stepping back to give her space. For a moment, she looked at him with something like gratitude, though it disappeared almost as quickly as it had come. The next morning, Liz emerged from the room, looking more like a ghost than a guest. Her eyes were shadowed, her posture stiff. Alex greeted her with a warm smile and a steaming cup of coffee, but she avoided his gaze, murmuring a quiet thanks before retreating to the corner of the room. He could tell she wasn't used to this. Kindness, comfort, stability. It broke his heart, but it also fueled his determination. If Liz couldn't trust the world, then he would become the one person she could rely on. Over the following days, Alex worked to rebuild the bridge between them. He avoided pressing questions about her past, knowing that trust had to be earned, not demanded. Instead, he focused on creating a sense of normalcy. Simple breakfast in the morning, light conversations about the city, and a steady offer of support whenever she needed it. Little by little, Liz began to thaw. She still kept her guard up, but there were moments when her walls cracked, like when she laughed softly at one of his clumsy attempts to cook dinner, or when she hesitated before saying goodnight, as if she wasn't quite ready to leave the room. It wasn't long before Alex brought up the idea of therapy. "I know it might seem scary," he said one evening, carefully choosing his words, "but sometimes talking to someone can help. You've been through a lot, Liz. You shouldn't have to carry it alone." Her reaction was immediate, a flash of anger in her eyes, followed by a sharp, defensive tone. "I'm not crazy, Alex. I don't need a shrink." "I'm not saying you're crazy," he said calmly. "I just think it could help you sort through everything you've been dealing with. It's not about fixing you. It's about giving you tools to heal." Liz glared at him for a moment before looking away, her expression softening. "I'll think about it," she muttered, and Alex knew better than to push further. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. One evening, Liz approached him in the living room, her face hesitant but resolute. "I'll try the therapy," she said quietly, her hands fidgeting nervously. Alex felt a surge of relief and pride, though he kept his expression neutral. "That's great," he said simply. "We'll take it one step at a time." From there, things began to change. Liz started attending weekly sessions with a therapist Alex had recommended, though she refused to discuss the details with him. Alex respected her privacy, but he couldn't help noticing the small shifts in her demeanor. She began to hold herself differently, still guarded, but with a hint of newfound confidence. She even started joining him for walks around the city, her gaze no longer fixed solely on the ground. Encouraged by her progress, Alex suggested another step: finding a job. "It doesn't have to be anything big," he told her. "Just something to help you get back on your feet. You're capable, Liz. More than you realize." Liz looked at him skeptically. "And who's going to hire me? I don't exactly have a glowing resume." "You'd be surprised," Alex said with a grin. "Let's start small. Maybe part-time work at a cafe or a bookstore. Something that lets you ease back into things." To his surprise, Liz agreed. Together, they compiled a modest resume and applied to a handful of local businesses. Within a week, she had landed a part-time job at a small bakery just a few blocks from Alex's building. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start, and that was all that mattered. Watching Liz take these steps was both humbling and inspiring. Alex had always seen himself as a man of action, someone who could solve problems with enough effort and determination. But this wasn't about solving anything. It was about standing beside Liz as she fought to reclaim her life. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks along the way. Some days, Liz retreated into herself, her progress stalled by the weight of her past. But she always got back up, her resilience shining through even in her darkest moments. For Alex, the journey was just as transformative. Helping Liz forced him to confront his own shortcomings. The way he'd let ambition blind him to the things that truly mattered. He began to see the world through her eyes, to understand the struggles of those who weren't born into privilege or handed second chances. It was a humbling realization, but one he welcomed. As the weeks turned into months, Liz began to carve out a new version of herself. She still had a long way to go, but she was no longer the broken woman Alex had found in the rain. She was strong, determined, and full of potential. And though she might never say it out loud, Alex knew she was beginning to trust him. But just as the storm had brought them together, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that another was looming on the horizon. He had helped Liz take her first steps, but the road ahead was far from smooth. For both of them, the real challenges were yet to come. Liz had always believed her life had little meaning beyond survival. Each day had been a battle to find food, shelter, and a fleeting moment of safety. But now, for the first time in years, she began to see a glimmer of something more. It started small, a sense of peace while kneading dough at the bakery, a flicker of pride when her therapist praised her for opening up. She couldn't name it at first, but it grew stronger each time she walked through Alex's door at the end of the day, greeted by his warm smile and unwavering encouragement. Slowly but surely, the idea took root. Perhaps her life could have purpose beyond just staying alive. One evening, as she and Alex sat on his couch sharing takeout, Liz found herself opening up about the things she had seen on the streets. She spoke about the people who had shared their blankets and stories, the acts of kindness that kept her going even when everything else seemed hopeless. "There are so many people out there," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the window. "So many who've lost everything, just like I did. But they're not all broken. Some of them just need someone to believe in them." Alex leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said after a moment, "you might be the perfect person to help them. You've lived it, Liz. You know what they're going through in a way most people never will." Liz shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "What could I possibly do? I'm barely holding myself together as it is." "That's not true," Alex countered. "You've come so far already, And you have something most people don't: compassion. You could take what you've been through and turn it into something powerful. Liz didn't respond immediately, but Alex's words stayed with her long after the conversation ended. Over the next few weeks, the idea began to crystallize in her mind. What if she could do something to help others like her? She didn't have Alex's wealth or connections, but she had her story. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to make a difference. It started with small acts. Liz began volunteering at the bakery to hand out leftover bread to the homeless at the end of each day. Then, she reached out to her therapist for advice on creating support groups for people transitioning out of homelessness. Before long, she was spending her evenings drafting plans for a community project, a safe space where people could access resources, share their experiences, and rebuild their lives. She called it Second Chance. When Liz finally told Alex about her idea, his reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "That's incredible," he said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "What do you need to get started?" Liz hesitated, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of her vision. "I don't even know," she admitted. "I've never done anything like this before. I don't have any money or experience. It's just a dream." Alex smiled, his confidence unshakable. "Then we'll figure it out together. You focus on the vision, and I'll help with the logistics. We'll start small and build from there." True to his word, Alex threw himself into the project alongside her. He reached out to his network, securing donations and partnerships that gave Second Chance its first lifeline. Meanwhile, Liz worked tirelessly to shape her dream into reality. She spent hours researching grant applications, meeting with local organizations, and gathering supplies for their modest but functional facility. The first few weeks were chaotic but exhilarating. Second Chance opened its doors in a small, rented space in Brooklyn, offering hot meals, clothing, and a listening ear to anyone who needed it. Liz was nervous on their first day, unsure if anyone would even show up. But by the end of the week, the space was bustling with people, some curious, others desperate, but all grateful for the kindness they found there. As the project gained traction, so did Liz's confidence. She discovered a natural talent for connecting with people, her empathy allowing her to break down walls others couldn't. Word spread quickly, and soon Second Chance was featured in a local newspaper. The article praised Liz's resilience and vision, painting her as a beacon of hope in a city that often overlooked its most vulnerable residents. But with recognition came challenges. The media attention attracted skeptics who questioned Liz's motives and criticized her for accepting Alex's financial support. Some accused her of using her story for personal gain, while others dismissed her as a charity case propped up by a wealthy benefactor. The judgment stung, reopening old wounds and making Liz question whether she was truly making a difference. One night, after reading a particularly cruel online comment, Liz confronted Alex. "What if they're right?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if this is all just a way for me to feel better about myself?" Alex's expression softened as he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Liz, you're changing lives. Those people out there don't care about what the critics say. They care about the meals you're providing, the shelter you're offering, and the hope you're giving them. Don't let a handful of voices drown out the good you're doing." His words grounded her, reminding her why she had started Second Chance in the first place. Over time, Liz learned to tune out the negativity and focus on the people who mattered, the ones walking through her doors every day, looking for a lifeline. By the end of the year, Second Chance had grown into a thriving community, its impact spreading far beyond what Liz had imagined. Local businesses began partnering with the project, offering job opportunities to participants. Formerly homeless individuals returned to volunteer, paying forward the compassion they had received. And through it all, Liz found herself transformed. For the first time, she felt not only capable but powerful. Her scars no longer a source of shame, but a testament to her strength. Yet, as Liz stood before a crowd of supporters at Second Chance's first fundraising gala, she couldn't help but glance at Alex in the audience. His unwavering belief in her had made all of this possible, and the gratitude she felt was immeasurable. But beneath that gratitude was something deeper, something she wasn't ready to admit. Not yet. As the applause filled the room, Liz realized her journey was far from over. She had found her purpose. But life had a way of throwing new challenges just when you thought you had everything figured out. Liz never expected her life to intertwine with Alex's so deeply. Despite her initial hesitance, she'd grown to trust him, not just as a man who had helped her off the streets, but as someone who genuinely cared about her vision, her struggles, and her growth. Yet, with trust came vulnerability, and with vulnerability came fear. The lines between gratitude and affection were blurring, leaving Liz questioning her own feelings. Did she care for Alex because of what he'd done for her, or was there something more beneath the surface? The weight of these questions only grew heavier as the world around them began to intrude. Liz wasn't naive. She knew Alex's wealth came with its own set of complications. As her project, Second Chance, gained more recognition, the whispers started. Donors, journalists, and even participants in her program began to speculate about her relationship with Alex. Isn't he funding all of this? Some would ask with thinly veiled skepticism. Others were less subtle, accusing her of riding his coattails to success. The rumors stung, not because Liz believed them, but because they fed into her deepest insecurities. What hurt more, though, was the judgment from Alex's circle. His family had always been an enigma to Liz, distant figures she'd heard about but never met. That changed one afternoon when Alex invited her to a charity luncheon hosted by his mother. Liz had hesitated, but Alex assured her it was just a casual event. "You've earned a seat at that table," he'd said with a smile. "They'll love you." But love was far from what Liz encountered. From the moment she stepped into the opulent ballroom, she felt the weight of their stares. Alex's mother, Veronica Carter, was the epitome of high society, graceful, poised, and intimidatingly perfect. She greeted Liz with a polite smile, but her eyes betrayed her disapproval. Throughout the luncheon, Veronica's remarks were laced with passive-aggressive undertones. "It's wonderful what you've done with Second Chance," she said at one point. "But I do wonder how sustainable it is without Alex's resources." Liz clenched her fists under the table, forcing herself to smile. "We've been fortunate to have incredible community support," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Alex noticed the tension and tried to defuse it, but the damage was done. By the time they left the event, Liz felt like a fraud. "You didn't tell me your family thought I was some kind of charity case," she said sharply as they walked to his car. "They don't think that," Alex replied, his tone defensive. "Really? Because that's exactly how your mother made me feel." The argument escalated, their words cutting deeper than either intended. For the first time since their reunion, Liz wondered if their worlds were simply too different. She'd spent her life fighting to survive, while Alex had been born into privilege. How could they possibly bridge that gap? The tension didn't end there. Alex's ex-girlfriend, Danielle, entered the picture shortly after the luncheon. A glamorous businesswoman with a reputation for ambition, Danielle made it clear she still had feelings for Alex. She appeared at Second Chance one afternoon, ostensibly to make a donation, but her intentions were transparent. "You've built something impressive here," she told Liz, her smile icy. "It's good to see Alex supporting causes he believes in. He's always been generous like that." Liz bristled at the implication, but refused to rise to the bait. Instead, she thanked Danielle for her contribution and excused herself. Later, she confronted Alex about Danielle's visit. "Why didn't you tell me she'd be coming?" "I didn't know," Alex said, his frustration evident. "She probably just wanted to stir up trouble." "Well, it worked," Liz snapped, her voice trembling. "I'm already dealing with your mother's judgment. I don't need your ex showing up and acting like I'm some project you're working on." Alex stepped closer, his voice softening. "Liz, you're not a project. You're so much more than that to me." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Liz wanted to believe him, But the doubts lingering in her mind were relentless. Was she truly more than a symbol of his generosity, or was she simply a reflection of his need to fix things? Their relationship reached a breaking point one evening when Liz overheard Alex on the phone with a potential donor. "Yes, Liz is the heart of this project," he was saying. "She's extraordinary, really. Her story is what makes all of this so impactful." Though his words were meant as praise, they struck a nerve. Liz couldn't shake the feeling that her identity was being reduced to her past, that she was being used as a tool to attract sympathy and funds. That night, she confronted Alex, her voice trembling with anger. "Do you even see me as a person, or am I just some sob story you parade around to make yourself look good?" Alex was stunned. "Liz, how can you even say that? Everything I've done has been to support you." "Exactly," Liz shot back. "You're always supporting me, helping me, fixing me. But what happens when I don't need fixing anymore? What happens when I'm no longer the broken girl you pulled out of the rain?" Her words cut deep, leaving Alex momentarily speechless. "I don't see you as broken," he said finally, his voice low. "I see you as strong, capable, and incredible. But if I've made you feel like anything less, then I've failed you, and I'm sorry." The tension between them lingered for days, but neither could deny the truth beneath their arguments. They cared for each other deeply, but their differences and the external pressures weighing on them were threatening to tear them apart. Liz began to question whether they could navigate the complexities of their relationship without losing themselves in the process. Despite the challenges, Liz found solace in her work at Second Chance. The project continued to grow, its impact spreading across the city. Every life she touched reminded her of why she had started this journey and why she couldn't let doubts or the judgments of others derail her. Yet, as Liz stood in the bustling Second Chance Center one afternoon, watching volunteers distribute meals and participants share laughter, she couldn't shake the feeling that her personal battles were far from over. Love, she realized, was its own kind of fight. And if she and Alex were to make it through, they would have to face not only the world's judgment, but their own fears as well. Liz had always been resilient, but she had never considered herself unbreakable. Her journey, from sleeping on rain-soaked benches to leading a community project, was proof of her strength, yet she still struggled with self-doubt. Every morning, as she walked into Second Chance, she reminded herself why she started it: to offer others the hope she once thought she'd lost forever. But beneath her confident facade, the weight of judgment, her past, and her uncertain relationship with Alex loomed large. Alex had been quieter lately. Their disagreements about his family and the public's perception of their connection had taken a toll. Though his presence was unwavering, Liz felt an emotional distance creeping in. She couldn't deny that she missed the warmth of his encouragement, the way he seemed to believe in her even when she didn't believe in herself. But now, every kind gesture or word of support felt tangled with complications. Were they truly partners, or was she still just a symbol of his charity? The turning point came on a day Liz would never forget. A reporter from a major news outlet visited Second Chance, eager to write a feature on its impact. Liz was initially hesitant, wary of how her story might be twisted, but she knew the exposure could bring much-needed resources to the project. During the interview, the reporter asked a question that made her pause. "What gave you the strength to transform your life after everything you've been through?" For a moment, Liz considered giving the usual answer about resilience and community support. But as she looked around the center, at the volunteers handing out meals, the participants sharing stories, and the photos of smiling faces on the walls, she realized the truth went deeper. It wasn't just strength, Liz said slowly, her voice steady. It was a belief that my story could matter, that the pain I went through could help someone else feel less alone. I think we all have that power to turn our struggles into something meaningful, but it takes people believing in you before you can believe in yourself. The reporter nodded, visibly moved, and Liz felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. For the first time, she wasn't just telling her story, she was owning it. Later that evening, as she and Alex sat in his penthouse, Liz shared the experience with him. It felt different this time, she admitted. Like I wasn't just reliving my past, but using it to build something bigger. Alex smiled, his eyes full of pride. That's because you've grown, Liz. You're not the same person you were when I found you in that park. You've turned your scars into strength, and people can see that. Liz hesitated before speaking again. I used to think you were the reason I could do all of this, she said quietly. But now I realize I'm the reason, too. You gave me the tools, Alex, but I'm the one who picked them up. Her words hung in the air, and Alex's expression shifted. A mix of admiration and something deeper, something unspoken. You're incredible, he said softly. The conversation marked a shift in their relationship. Liz no longer felt like she owed Alex her success. Instead, she saw him as a partner, someone who had walked alongside her rather than pulling her forward. The distance between them began to close, replaced by a mutual respect that strengthened their bond. But their journey was far from over. As Second Chance continued to grow, Liz faced new challenges that tested her resolve. A local politician, eager to use the project for his campaign, offered a sizable donation on the condition that Liz endorse his platform. Though the funds could have expanded their reach significantly, Liz refused, unwilling to compromise her integrity. The decision sparked backlash. Some accused her of being naive, of putting pride before progress. The criticism was hard to bear, but Liz stood firm. Second Chance isn't about politics, she told Alex one evening. It's about people. If I start compromising on that, then I've already lost. Alex nodded, his support unwavering. You're doing the right thing, Liz, and the people who matter will see that. His words proved true sooner than Liz expected. A group of local businesses, inspired by her commitment to the project's values, approached her with a proposal. They offered not only financial support, but also job opportunities for Second Chance participants. The partnership was a game changer, giving Liz the resources she needed to expand the project without sacrificing its mission. With the newfound support, Liz threw herself into the work, pouring her heart and soul into every aspect of Second Chance. She organized workshops on job training and financial literacy, created mentorship programs, and even launched a mental health initiative to ensure participants had access to the care they needed. Each step forward felt like a victory, not just for Liz, but for every person who walked through the center's doors. As the months passed, Liz's transformation became undeniable. She was no longer the woman Alex had found in the rain, lost and broken. She had become a leader, a symbol of hope and resilience for others who had been told they were too far gone. And through it all, Alex remained by her side, his admiration for her growing with each passing day. One evening, after a particularly successful event at Second Chance, Liz and Alex found themselves alone in the center's quiet office. Liz leaned against the desk, her eyes scanning the room as she reflected on how far they had come. "You know," she said, her voice tinged with wonder, "I used to think my life was over, that I was just waiting for the end. But now, it feels like it's just beginning." Alex stepped closer, his gaze steady. "That's because you found your purpose," he said. "And you've shown everyone, including me, that it's never too late to start again." For a moment, the air between them was charged with unspoken emotions. Liz met Alex's gaze, her heart pounding as she realized how much he meant to her. Not just as a man who had helped her, but as someone who truly saw her. As they stood there, the world outside seemed to fade away. Liz knew there were still battles to fight, challenges to overcome. But in that moment, with Alex by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Liz once believed she was incapable of changing her own life, let alone inspiring change in others. Yet, as she stood before a crowd gathered for Second Chance's first anniversary event, the magnitude of what she had accomplished felt overwhelming. The small community center that started with secondhand furniture and donated meals had grown into a hub of transformation. There were now partnerships with businesses, educational workshops, and a thriving volunteer network. Every success story, Every smiling face in the audience was a testament to the power of resilience, compassion, and hard work. The event was a celebration, but Liz approached it with humility. She stepped onto the modest stage, the spotlight catching the natural grace she had begun to reclaim. "A year ago," she began, her voice steady, "I didn't believe I had anything left to give. I thought my story was over, that my pain defined me. But someone reminded me that pain doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning." Her eyes drifted to Alex, seated in the front row, his expression one of quiet pride. Liz's speech wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was raw and heartfelt. She spoke of the friends she had made during her darkest days. People who had shared what little they had without expecting anything in return. "They taught me," she continued, "that even when the world turns its back on you, there's kindness to be found if you're willing to look for it. Second Chance isn't just my story, it's theirs. And it's yours." The applause was thunderous, but Liz barely noticed. Her mind was already racing with ideas for what could come next. The anniversary wasn't the culmination of her work. It was just the beginning. With the program thriving, Liz began to focus on empowering others to take ownership of their stories. She implemented a mentorship initiative, pairing participants with volunteers who had once been in their shoes. The mentors weren't therapists or social workers. They were former homeless individuals, single parents, and people who had faced their own struggles and come out stronger. "They don't need lectures," Liz told her team during one planning session. "They need someone who understands what they're going through." The program quickly became a cornerstone of Second Chance's mission. One of its first success stories was Maya, a young mother who had been living in a shelter with her 2 children. Through the mentorship program, she connected with Caroline, a former participant who had rebuilt her life and now worked as a case manager. Under Caroline's guidance, Maya found stable housing and a job at a local cafe. Watching Maya's confidence grow reminded Liz of her own journey and reinforced why Second Chance mattered so much. The momentum didn't stop there. A national nonprofit took notice of Liz's work and reached out with a proposition to collaborate on a series of satellite centers modeled after Second Chance in other cities. The offer was both exciting and daunting. Liz had poured her heart into building a community in Brooklyn. The idea of replicating it on a larger scale felt almost impossible, but Alex encouraged her to dream bigger. "This isn't just about Brooklyn anymore," he told her one evening as they reviewed the proposal. "Your vision can help people everywhere. Don't let fear hold you back." Liz nodded, her determination growing. With Alex's support, she decided to move forward. The partnership led to the creation of 3 new Second Chance centers in nearby cities, each with its own team of passionate leaders and volunteers. Liz visited each one personally, sharing her story and working alongside the staff to ensure the core values of compassion and dignity remained intact. The expansion brought challenges, of course. Balancing her time between the original center and the new ones left Liz stretched thin, and the pressure of managing a growing organization began to take its toll. There were days when she felt like she was failing, missing important meetings, forgetting names, and falling behind on paperwork. But every time she felt overwhelmed, she reminded herself of the people she was helping. She wasn't perfect, but she was persistent, and that was enough. Amid the chaos, her bond with Alex continued to deepen. He became her sounding board, her confidant, and her constant source of encouragement. Though they avoided labeling their relationship, there was an unspoken understanding between them. They didn't need grand declarations or romantic gestures. Their connection was built on mutual respect and shared purpose. One night, after a long day of meetings and site visits, Liz and Alex found themselves alone in the original Second Chance Center. The room was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound. Liz leaned against the counter, exhausted but content. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked, her voice soft. Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. "All the time, but I'm more interested in where we're going." Liz smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. For so long, she had felt alone in her struggles. But now she had a partner who believed in her as much as she believed in herself. "Wherever it is," she said, "I think we're ready." The next morning, Liz received an email that left her speechless. The Second Chance Initiative had been nominated for a National Humanitarian Award, recognizing its impact on homelessness and community empowerment. The nomination was a testament to everything they had achieved, but Liz knew it was just the beginning of what they could accomplish. As she stood in the center that day, watching volunteers distribute meals and participants attend workshops, Liz felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her journey had been far from easy, but it had led her here, to this moment, surrounded by people who believed in the power of hope and second chances. But even as she celebrated the project's success, Liz couldn't ignore the quiet voice in her mind, reminding her of the battles still ahead. The expansion, the scrutiny, and the personal sacrifices were only growing. Yet, for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the challenges. She had faced storms before and come out stronger. As the sun set on another busy day, Liz looked out at the city skyline, her thoughts drifting to Alex. Their relationship was evolving, but its foundation was unshakable. Together, they had proven that compassion and resilience could transform lives, not just their own, but countless others. The future was uncertain, but Liz felt ready to embrace it. She had built something extraordinary, and she wasn't done yet. The best was still to come. Liz had always believed that growth came with challenges, but nothing could have prepared her for the trials Second Chance now faced. As the organization expanded beyond Brooklyn, the complexities multiplied. Managing multiple centers meant juggling different teams, navigating varying local regulations, and addressing the distinct needs of each community. It was rewarding but relentless, and Liz often found herself stretched to her limits. One evening, as she reviewed grant applications in the dim light of her apartment, Liz felt the weight of exhaustion settle over her. Her phone buzzed with a call from Alex, and she hesitated before answering. Their conversations had become less frequent lately, both of them consumed by their respective responsibilities. Still, his voice was warm and familiar, a lifeline in the chaos. "How's my favorite changemaker?" Alex asked, his tone light but sincere. Liz smiled despite herself. "Tired," she admitted. "Sometimes it feels like the more we grow, the less I'm able to keep up." "You're doing incredible work, Liz," he reassured her. "But you don't have to do it all alone. Delegate, trust your team." Alex's advice was sound, but putting it into practice was easier said than done. Liz had always been hands-on, unwilling to relinquish control of the project she had poured her soul into. But as the pressures mounted, she knew she had no choice. Over the next few weeks, Liz began empowering her team leaders to take more responsibility, allowing her to focus on the bigger picture. Her decision to step back from the day-to-day operations wasn't without challenges. Mistakes were made, tensions flared, and Liz found herself questioning whether she had made the right call. But slowly, she began to see the benefits. Her team rose to the occasion, finding innovative solutions and building stronger connections with the communities they served. Liz realized that her role wasn't to manage every detail. It was to inspire and guide. Amid the organizational struggles, Liz faced personal challenges as well. The media attention surrounding Second Chance had only grown, and with it came scrutiny. An investigative journalist published an article questioning Alex's involvement in the project, insinuating that his financial support gave him undue influence. The piece painted Liz as a puppet of a billionaire benefactor, undermining her credibility and the authenticity of her mission. Liz was furious, not just for herself but for the people who relied on Second Chance. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she told Alex one evening, pacing the length of his living room. "They're taking something good and twisting it into a scandal." Alex remained calm, though Liz could see the tension in his jaw. "We'll respond," he said firmly, "but we'll do it on our terms. You've built something real, Liz. No article can take that away." With Alex's help, Liz crafted a response, highlighting the transparency of Second Chance's operations and the countless lives it had impacted. She also used the opportunity to redirect the narrative, focusing on the stories of those who had benefited from the program. The backlash didn't disappear overnight, but Liz's authenticity won over many skeptics. Even as the controversy subsided, the challenges kept coming. A major donor unexpectedly withdrew their funding, citing concerns about the negative press. The loss threatened to derail plans for a new center in Queens, and Liz felt the familiar pang of doubt creeping in. Was she in over her head? But just as despair began to take hold, Liz's team rallied around her. Volunteers organized grassroots fundraisers, participants shared their stories on social media, and local businesses stepped in with donations. The community Liz had helped build refused to let Second Chance falter. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraiser, Liz sat with Alex in a quiet corner of the center. The room was empty now, but the energy of the event lingered in the air. Liz leaned back in her chair, exhaustion and gratitude washing over her. "Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it," she admitted. "The stress, the sacrifices, it's so much." Alex reached for her hand, his touch steady and reassuring. "It is worth it," he said simply, "because what you're doing matters, and because you're not just changing lives, you're saving them." His words resonated deeply, but they also reminded Liz of the sacrifices she had made along the way. She had poured so much of herself into Second Chance that she often felt there was little left for anything else. Her relationship with Alex, while strong, had taken a back seat to her work. As the weeks passed, Liz began to focus on finding balance. She started setting boundaries, carving out time for herself and for Alex. They began spending quiet evenings together, sharing meals and conversations that had nothing to do with work. These moments became a sanctuary for Liz, a reminder of the life she was building beyond Second Chance. But even as Liz found a semblance of stability, she knew the journey was far from over. Second Chance was thriving, but its growth came with new responsibilities and pressures. Liz had proven she could lead, but now she had to prove she could sustain. The challenges ahead were daunting, but Liz felt ready to face them. She had learned to trust her team, her community, and most importantly, herself. And with Alex by her side, she knew she wasn't alone. As Liz stood in the bustling center one afternoon, watching volunteers prepare for another busy day, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road had been long and often uncertain, but every step had brought her closer to the life she had once thought impossible. The world would always throw challenges her way, but Liz had learned to embrace them. After all, transformation wasn't just about overcoming obstacles. It was about finding the strength to keep going, no matter how hard the journey. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Second Chance's Brooklyn headquarters, casting long shadows over the bustling activity inside. Volunteers greeted participants with warm smiles, distributing fresh bread and coffee to those seeking refuge. Liz stood in the doorway of her office, watching it all with a sense of pride that felt both fragile and immense. The project had grown beyond her wildest dreams, yet with each step forward, the stakes only seemed to rise. The pressure was undeniable. Liz was no stranger to sleepless nights, but lately, the weight of her responsibilities had grown heavier. The expansion of Second Chance meant more centers to oversee, more staff to manage, and more participants relying on her vision. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. To make matters more complicated, her relationship with Alex was reaching a crossroads. While his unwavering support had been her rock, Liz couldn't ignore the growing tension between them. That tension came to a head during a quiet dinner at Alex's penthouse. He had prepared a simple pasta dish, and they sat across from each other at the sleek dining table, the city skyline glittering behind them. "You're not eating," Alex said gently, his voice tinged with concern. Liz set her fork down, her appetite non-existent. "I'm just distracted," she admitted, her gaze fixed on the plate. "There's so much going on. The Queen Center is behind schedule. One of our major donors is threatening to pull out, and I feel like I'm constantly playing catch-up." Alex reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You don't have to carry all of this on your own," he said softly. "You've built an incredible team, Liz. Let them take some of the load." Liz pulled her hand away, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "It's not that simple, Alex. This isn't just a business. It's people's lives. I can't afford to let anything slip through the cracks." His expression darkened, a rare glimpse of frustration flashing in his eyes. "And what about your life? When was the last time you did something just for yourself? You're burning out, Liz. And if you don't take care of yourself, how are you supposed to take care of anyone else?" The question hung in the air, sharp and unrelenting. Liz knew he was right, but admitting it felt like a betrayal of everything she had fought for. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I need some air," she muttered, grabbing her coat and heading for the door. The crisp night air hit her like a wake-up call as she stepped onto the balcony. The city stretched out before her, vast and indifferent, a constant reminder of the challenges she faced. Liz leaned against the railing, her thoughts racing. She had always prided herself on her strength, but lately, that strength felt like it was unraveling. The following weeks were a blur of activity and exhaustion. Liz threw herself into her work, determined to prove to herself, to Alex, to everyone, that she could handle the pressure. But the cracks in her armor were beginning to show. Small mistakes turned into bigger issues, and Liz found herself snapping at her staff, her patience worn thin. One afternoon, during a particularly tense meeting, her project manager, Carla, spoke up. "Liz, you've been pushing yourself too hard," she said gently. "We all see it. Let us help." The words stung, but they also brought a flood of relief. Liz had been so consumed by her fears of failure that she had forgotten the strength of the community she had built. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "You're right," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't do this alone." That moment marked a turning point. Liz began delegating more responsibilities to her team, trusting them to handle tasks she had once clung to. It wasn't easy, letting go never was, but it allowed her to focus on what truly mattered, the people Second Chance served. As Liz regained her balance, her relationship with Alex also began to heal. He continued to be her steadfast supporter, but he also challenged her in ways that pushed her to grow. One evening, as they walked through Central Park, Alex stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "Liz, I need to ask you something," he said, his voice serious. She looked at him, her heart pounding. "What is it? Do you see a future for us?" he asked, his gaze searching hers. "Not just as partners in this work, but as something more." The question took her by surprise, though she realized it shouldn't have. Their connection had deepened in ways neither of them could ignore, but Liz had been too afraid to confront it. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been so focused on everything else, I haven't let myself think about it." Alex stepped closer, his expression softening. "Well, maybe it's time to start thinking about it," he said. "Because I know where I stand, Liz. I've known for a long time." His words left her speechless, a mix of fear and hope swirling in her chest. The idea of a future with Alex was both exhilarating and daunting, but Liz knew she couldn't avoid the conversation forever. As she navigated her personal and professional challenges, Liz found solace in the stories of those who had found hope through Second Chance. One such story was Marcus, a former participant who had gone from living in his car to becoming a mentor and community leader. Watching him speak at a panel discussion, Liz felt a surge of pride and validation. This was why she fought so hard, because every life transformed was a victory worth celebrating. The panel ended with a standing ovation, and as Liz joined the applause, she realized something important. Her journey wasn't just about overcoming adversity. It was about embracing the connections and support that made growth possible. Later that night, as she stood in the quiet center, Liz allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The past year had been the hardest of her life, but it had also been the most meaningful. She had faced judgments, setbacks, and her own fears, yet she had emerged stronger each time. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, Liz knew one thing for sure. She wasn't walking it alone. The evening air was crisp, carrying a quiet sense of anticipation as Liz stepped onto the stage. The auditorium was packed. Donors, volunteers, participants, and supporters from across the city had gathered to celebrate the milestone, Second Chance's second anniversary. As Liz scanned the sea of faces, she saw stories woven into each expression. These weren't just spectators. They were people whose lives had been touched by her mission. The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the room. Liz took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. 2 years ago, I was sitting on a park bench in the rain, convinced that my story was over, she began, her voice clear but emotional. I thought I had nothing left to give, nothing left to hope for. But someone reminded me that even the most broken stories can be rewritten. Her words hung in the air, resonating deeply with the audience. Liz had rehearsed the speech, but now, standing here, she spoke from the heart. Second Chance wasn't built by one person, she continued. It was built by every hand that handed out a meal, every voice that offered encouragement, and every person who refused to give up, even when the odds were against them. As Liz's speech drew to a close, the audience erupted into applause. Alex, seated in the front row, rose to his feet, his expression a mix of pride and admiration. Their eyes met briefly, and Liz felt a swell of gratitude. He had been her anchor, her partner, and her unwavering supporter. And now, as she stood on the stage, she realized just how far they had come, not just as individuals, but together. The celebration that followed was a blur of handshakes, hugs, and heartfelt conversations. Liz moved through the crowd, thanking donors and sharing laughs with volunteers. But amid the joy, she felt a quiet urgency, something unfinished, something she needed to address. Later that evening, Liz found Alex standing on the balcony, looking out over the city. The cool breeze ruffled his hair, and he seemed lost in thought. She approached him, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, leaning on the railing beside him. Alex turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips. "Just thinking about everything that's happened," he said. "And how proud I am of you." Liz smiled, though her expression was tinged with uncertainty. "Alex, there's something I need to say," she began, her voice hesitant. "I've been so focused on the project, on proving myself, that I've avoided a lot of things, us included." Alex met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said quietly, "but I've been patient because I know how much this means to you." Liz nodded, her chest tightening. "And it does mean everything to me, but so do you." Her voice softened, her vulnerability shining through. "You've been there for me when I didn't even know how to be there for myself. And I'm scared, Alex. Scared of what it means to let someone in completely." Alex reached for her hand, his touch steady and grounding. "Liz, I don't need perfect. I just need real. Whatever you're ready to give, I'll take it." The honesty in his words struck a chord in Liz, and for the first time, she allowed herself to fully embrace what she had been holding back. "I want to build something with you," she said, her voice steady. "Not just here, not just with Second Chance, but in our lives. Together." Alex's smile widened, and in that moment, the city lights seemed to shine a little brighter. The next few weeks marked a turning point. With Alex by her side, Liz began to find a balance she had long struggled to achieve. She leaned on her team more, trusting them to handle the daily operations while she focused on the broader vision. The Queen Center finally opened, and plans for another expansion were already underway. Liz also started carving out time for herself, something she had neglected for far too long. Whether it was quiet mornings with a cup of coffee or evenings spent with Alex, she began to rediscover parts of herself that had been buried beneath years of survival and sacrifice. One afternoon, as Liz walked through the original Second Chance Center, she stopped to admire a mural that had recently been painted on one of the walls. It depicted a phoenix rising from the ashes, Its wings spread wide against a backdrop of vibrant colors. Beneath it were the words, "Hope is not the absence of struggle, but the strength to rise again." The mural had been created by participants of the program, each stroke of paint a testament to their journeys. Liz felt a lump rise in her throat as she read the inscription, the words echoing her own story. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said from behind her. Liz turned to see Marcus, one of the program's first success stories, standing with a paintbrush in hand. "It's perfect," Liz replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You've all done an incredible job." Marcus smiled, his pride evident. "We couldn't have done it without you," he said. Liz shook her head, her humility shining through. "You did this," she said firmly. "You took the steps. You made the changes. I just gave you a space to start." The exchange reminded Liz of why she had started Second Chance, to create a ripple effect of hope and empowerment. And as she looked at the mural, she knew that the legacy she was building wasn't hers alone. As the second year of Second Chance came to a close, Liz found herself standing on yet another stage, this time at a national conference on homelessness and social change. She had been invited to speak about the impact of the project, and as she addressed the crowd, she realized how much she had grown. Her voice was steady, her confidence unshakable. She spoke not as someone defined by her past, but as a leader who had turned her pain into purpose. And as she looked out at the audience, she saw not just supporters, but potential allies in the fight to create a more compassionate world. That night, as Liz and Alex walked hand in hand through the quiet streets of Brooklyn, she felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time, Liz felt ready to embrace whatever came her way. Together, they had proven that second chances weren't just possible. They were transformative. And as Liz looked at the skyline, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Enjoy the story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Share your thoughts in the comments and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next thrilling episode. See you in our next video. Take care